My name is Mary, and my husband's name at the moment is Jack. I am 51 years old, and he is 52 years old. We have been married for 32 years and have 2 grown children. Both are college graduates and married, but have no grandchildren yet. We live a comfortable life, and until about a year ago, we had a healthy sex life. We usually made love at least twice a week. About 10 years ago, I had a hysterectomy and started taking hormone replacement therapy Premarin. Sexually, everything remained the same, and I retained the same sexual desire as before. Then, about 2 years ago, a panic arose among my friends about taking hormone replacement drugs. Supposedly, they increased the likelihood of developing cancer and heart disease. I didn't really think about it, but after about a year, I found out that most of my friends had stopped taking Premarin. They strongly advised me to stop too. I called my OB/GYN and asked her about it. She said there is some risk, but she thinks it's acceptable for most women. But it was my decision. She warned me that if I stopped, I would go through menopause. I will most likely experience hot flashes and sweating. I may have mood swings and my sex drive may decrease, perhaps to 0. Sexual intercourse could be so painful that I could not bear it. I thanked her. These were serious consequences. My friends kept pestering me, telling me to stop. That sex wasn't worth dying for. They said they were glad their sex life was over. It was a relief. Their husbands were not happy, but that was their problem. They said that if Jack persists, tell him that you cannot believe that he thinks about his sex more than about you, that he is willing to risk your life for his sexual gratification. This should make him comply. I really enjoyed sex, but I wanted to live so I could see my grandchildren. So I stopped taking this medicine. I told Jack, but I didn't fill him in on all the details of the likely consequences. Within a month, I started having hot flashes and sweating. Over the next few months, my sex drive gradually decreased and I no longer wanted to do it. I know I have to satisfy Jack at least sometimes. Sexual intercourse became unbearably painful. This satisfied him, but did not suit me, and he wanted the same frequency as before. Honestly, I'm tired of doing this. I wasn't getting anything out of it, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. Our sex life was over, and, as my friends told me, I was glad. This was a relief for me, but not for him. All I had to do was explain everything and tell Jack that I couldn't have sex with him like I had before. He didn't take the news well at all. He was very upset, saying that he was not ready to give up his sex life. I told him that I had absolutely no sexual attraction or desire. I was physically, mentally, and emotionally unable to do this anymore. He kept talking about trying low doses of Premarin. Finally, I had enough of him and I said, "Enough! I don't want to hear about this anymore. I can't believe that you are so selfish and think so little of me that you are willing to risk my life just to satisfy your sexual needs. Why don't you grow up and stop whining? It's over. Deal with it and accept it." He just looked at me and walked away. He returned home very late and slept on the sofa. He sulked for a couple of weeks and gradually seemed to come to his senses. Our lives are pretty much back to normal, just no sex. And there was no intimacy. He stopped hugging and kissing me, and there was no tenderness. In bed, he turned his back to me. I realized that I didn't care. I didn't want any physical contact with him at all. About a month later, instead of going to bed after we showered, he started staying up late. He told me he wanted to watch TV to relax. At first, he did this a couple of evenings a week. Then he stayed almost every night. I wondered why. He had never really been interested in television before, especially late at night. The next night, he headed to the TV and I went to bed. About an hour and a half later, I woke up and had to get up to go to the toilet. And he wasn't in bed. Having finished, I entered the room. The TV was on, but Jack wasn't there. I saw that the light was on in the office and went to the door. Jack was sitting in front of the computer and watching a movie for adults. Jack's shorts were pulled down to his ankles. He was engaged in self-satisfaction. He had a towel on his lap. Jack moaned with pleasure. I knew that he was on the verge of no return. At that moment, I entered the room and shouted loudly, "So this is what you do in the evenings in front of the TV!" He started to stand up and tried to turn around, but got caught in his shorts. which were pulled down below his knees. He lost his balance, dropping his towel when he caught the back of a chair. Finally, he straightened up and pulled the towel over himself. He then pulled up his shorts and looked at me. It was almost comical. It would be ideal if it was filmed with the credits America's Most Embarrassing Home Videos. I started with a question. What are you doing? I can't believe that you, a grown man, can't control your sexual urges. You need to sneak off to the office to watch some adult movies. I can't believe you could humiliate yourself and me like that. I have absolutely no respect for you anymore. He replied, well, if you hadn't decided that our sex life was over, I wouldn't have done this. It was your decision. You suggested that I could just turn off my feelings because that's what you wanted. Well, I can't and won't try to do that. I, a physically healthy, sexy man, I simply cannot live without sex. This is what my body requires. Me watching adult videos and doing this doesn't hurt you, and it certainly doesn't hurt me. It doesn't harm anyone. At least I'm not cheating on you with other women. I shot back. You? With other women? This is laughter. Look at you. You are 52 years old. Half the time you don't shave, you're at least 30 pounds overweight, and your clothes are anything but fashionable. You look like a bloated sausage. You are a slot. I pointed at his belly and said, the only way a woman could satisfy you in bed is if you paid her. I'll tell you what. If you can find a woman who wants to sleep with you without you paying her, I want you to bring her home and have sex in our bed while I watch. I'm not the least bit worried about this because it will never happen. I saw tears begin to appear in his eyes, but I continued. I slowly looked him up and down with the most disgusting look I could muster. I said, you won't sleep in our bed. You can sleep here in the office with your computer slut. And I better not find any stains on my furniture or carpet. Then, in my most poisonous voice, I said, you are disgusting and pathetic. Then I turned and walked back into our bedroom and slammed the door. I was very proud of myself and had no problem falling back to sleep. The next morning I got up and noticed that Jack had already left for work. I think he quietly got dressed and left. I was pretty hard on him and said some pretty cruel words. And I can't believe I actually made him cry. But I decided that what I did was the only way to make him understand that our sex life was over. He just had to accept it. I went to work, knowing that it was for his own good. I always come home from work before Jack. I went into our bedroom to change before dinner and noticed that most of his clothes, shoes, and toiletries were gone. He must have come home at lunchtime and brought out his things, but where? I knew he wouldn't actually leave, so I checked the spare bedroom upstairs. I was right. It was all there. I changed my clothes and set dinner on the table when he arrived. I told him to sit down and eat while it's hot. He did so and ate without saying a word. I said, I noticed that you moved into the spare bedroom upstairs. He ignored me. Could you tell me why? He looked at me intently and finally said, last night you made it abundantly clear what you thought of me. The very sight of me disgusted you, so I am sure that you will never want to see me in our marital bed. Although, in fact, this has not been a marital bed for quite some time. It's just a place where we sleep. I think you'll be pleased. I said, I just didn't want you in our bed last night. I didn't want you to move. You are acting ridiculous and childish. All I want is for you to understand and accept that our sex life is over. I don't want to fight with you anymore about this. Sorry. I was a little rude, but it was the only way to get this across your head. Jack replied, the only thing I understand is that your sex life is over, and I'm disgusting and pathetic. I moved so as not to offend you with my presence. This way, if I want to watch dirty videos, I can do it behind a closed and locked door. I will not subject you to this humiliation. Then he went upstairs. I was stunned. I did not expect such strong resistance or indignation. About 45 minutes later, he came downstairs wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt and headed for the door. I stopped him and asked where he was going. He said, you were right about one thing last night. I'm an overweight slob. I allowed myself to relax. I renewed my membership at Bally's Fitness and am going to work out. I laughed and said, it definitely won't last long. You won't be able to stick to this routine. I can't even believe that's where you're going. I'm guessing you go to one of those adult video stores to watch something new and retire to one of the private booths. He just looked at me and I saw the pain in his eyes. Then he left. I opened the door and shouted, "I'm going to test you and see if you're going there." I waited 15 minutes and went to the fitness center. Of course, his car was in the parking lot. I walked up and looked out the window. He was there, running on the treadmill. I was convinced that this time he was telling the truth. I went home and went to bed. This morning, I saw Jack as he was leaving. He just looked at me and then walked away, without saying a word. Things weren't going the way I imagined. I decided to step back and let him calm down. All I managed to do was completely piss him off and push him away. This really wasn't what I wanted. I really still loved him. Perhaps I went too far with him. I had already prepared dinner when he returned home. He sat down and began to eat without saying a word. I asked how his day was, and he simply said, "Good." I told him that I had talked to the children and told him about them. He replied, "That's good." I asked how his training went, and again, "Okay." I said, "I bet your muscles hurt. I bought a bottle of Motrin at the store and put it in the upstairs bathroom." He simply said, "Thank you." We finished eating, and he went upstairs to the spare bedroom, which was now his bedroom. He came down 30 minutes later, dressed to go to training again. I said, "Have a good workout." He simply nodded and left. Over the next month, Jack got into the habit of working out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I checked on it from time to time, and it was always there. Over time, he became a little less cold and distant. It wasn't even close to a normal relationship, but we had real conversations and were polite to each other. After about 3 months, I noticed a big change in Jack. He lost more than 30 pounds and got toned. His new clothes fit him well, and he kept himself in good condition. He was a different person. I even had thoughts about what it would be like to make love to the new Jack. But my sex drive was still absent. I tried to play with myself, but I didn't feel anything. The lack of hormones definitely took its toll on me. A few months later, I came across a research paper that said the risk of taking Premarin was not as great as thought. Some studies have even suggested there may be benefits. I was confused. Was what I went through and what I did to Jack really not even necessary? In the end, I decided that the risk was really small and I was willing to take it. I called my OB/GYN and she said I had to come in for a test before she would write me a prescription. I made an appointment for next week. She refrained from telling me, "I told you so." I wasn't going to tell Jack until I saw my doctor. I didn't know how he would take it. Would he be happy and excited that we could be like we used to be? Or would he be even more furious because I should never have put him through all of this in the first place? I really missed him and wanted him to come back to our bed, with me. When I really thought about how I treated him, I felt terrible. I was absolutely cruel to him. Honestly, I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was a hormonal imbalance, but still this did not justify my behavior. For the first time, I thought I might actually lose him. After I talked to my doctor, I was going to sit him down and try to explain it all, and I was going to apologize for how much I hurt him. I hoped this would be enough. On Saturday around 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I walked to the door, and it was Marcia. She and Ted were in a group of friends that we used to hang out with. I haven't seen her for almost 2 years. Ted was diagnosed with cancer, and they had to retreat from social life while he began treatment. The cancer was advanced and aggressive, and he died about 18 months ago. I regretted not keeping in touch with her. I invited her in and told her how sorry I was. I asked her how she was doing. She said that for the first year she just stayed at home and distanced herself from everyone. But in the end, she realized that it was not doing her any good. Over the past 6 months, she has changed her attitude and returned to life. She said that she had allowed herself to relax, and if she had any hope of being in the company of men, she would have to clean up her act. She joined Bally's fitness center, and there she ran into Jack. I was a little embarrassed and said, "I'm glad you're feeling better, but why are you here?" She said, "Jack invited me." I answered, "I don't understand." "What do you mean?" Jack came in and said, "Exactly. I invited her. Marcia and I are dating. After we met at Bally's, we went to lunch to talk and catch up. She asked about you, and I told her in detail what was going on between us. We started meeting for lunch 2 or 3 days a week. Do you remember those Saturdays when I said I had to work? We spent them together. Our feelings have grown and we want to make love to each other. I was stunned. He said, remember when you told me that if I found a woman for sex without paying her, you wanted me to bring her home and have sex in our bed while you watched? Well, here she is. Hope the sheets are clean. I actually remembered everything I said and how I ridiculed and humiliated him. I said, you can't be serious. I just said all this to hurt you. That's not what I really meant. He said, well, you definitely did a great job. I have never been in so much pain in my life, and from my wife, the only person in the world whom I loved unconditionally and thought she felt the same about me. That's exactly what you meant. You were very persistent. Neither you nor I had any doubts. I shot back. You're bluffing. You just want to hurt me because I hurt you. He simply took Marcia's hand and led her into our bedroom. I never thought this would happen. What am I talking about? Obviously, I was a real fool. I slowly got up and went to our bedroom. They had both already undressed, hugging and kissing. I couldn't believe how good Jack's body looked, and Marcia looked great too, much better than me. They lay down on the bed, and Jack began to kiss her on the lips, neck, body, and went lower and lower with kisses. He slowly kissed and caressed her. Marcia moaned. He increased the intensity and started having mind-blowing sex with her. Marcia moaned softly at first, then it was one long, loud moan, and then she screamed loudly and went quiet. Jack kissed and hugged her tenderly. Marcia then began to kiss Jack tenderly. She started doing it slowly and then moved lower. You could see the love in her eyes. She did everything she could to please him. I couldn't remember the last time I did this for Jack. He didn't last long and moaned with pleasure. They kissed and hugged. Jack was still horny and he wanted to make love to her. They kissed and caressed each other and then proceeded to have sex. This continued for a good 15 minutes. Marcia and Jack were pleased with each other. They hugged each other and kissed. It was one of the most erotic and sensual things I've ever seen. It was just wonderful, and it could be me. It should have been me, but I refused it. And for what? Why did I listen to my fucking friends? They got dressed and Jack said, I'm moving in with Marcia. I'll come by tomorrow and start moving my things out of the house. I spoke with my lawyer and began divorce proceedings. I won't be as cruel to you as you were to me. We will agree on a fair division. I realize that I'm not really that angry at you anymore. You were right. I was a slob. If I hadn't taken what you said to heart, I would have continued to live a miserable life with you. Now I have Marcia, and for the first time in a very long time, I am happy. Thank you. And you should be happy too. You don't have to live with someone disgusting and pathetic. You can live the rest of your sexless life completely alone. I think we both got what we wanted. Then they left. I sat and sobbed. It was my fault. I can only blame myself. Our divorce will be final next month, and Jack and Marcia are planning to get married. I wish them all the best. I really do.